Okay, so let's start off. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on harnessing data and enhancing revenue with ANPR. I'll introduce myself first of all. So my name is Sonia. I'm a senior account manager here at Unity 5, relatively new to the company, but I've been working in the parking industry for about 6 years now, primarily for one of the UK's leading ANPR providers in the private sector of enforcement. I'm delighted to be with you today and have the opportunity to talk to some of our customers and colleagues from the parking sector and explore a topic that is becoming increasingly valuable. We have a few talking points for the panel and a few have already sent in some questions. So thank you for those that sent these in. However, if you do have a question yourself or if anything else that you'd like to mention, please put it in the Q&A box, which I've been told is at the bottom of your screen, and we will come to these as we go. So without further ado, let me introduce you to our panel. With us today, we have Joe Bubb, who is a Senior Account Manager here at Unity 5, John O'Clark, who is our Technical Partnership Manager, Andrew Fletcher, who is a Product Sales Manager at Unix Traffic, and finally Simon Jarvis, who's a Sales Director at Arvu. I'll let them introduce themselves and give you all a bit more information about what they do. So Joe, if you want to kick us off.
Hi everyone, as Sonia has just said, my name is Joe and I've also recently joined Unity 5 Zatpark as a senior account manager. My previous role was a key account manager working in one of the largest parking private operators in the country. Whilst there, I was managing a big portfolio of over 1,500 sites, which was split across many different managing agents and landowners. And specifically, my role there was focusing on the adoption of ANPR and informing my clients of how they can use it, where they can use it, and how best to utilize the software.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Joe. Jono, you want to carry on with the Unity 5?
Hi, everybody. I'm John O'Clark. I'm the Technical Partnerships Manager. As Sonia introduced us earlier, I've been working for Unity 5 for the last 7 years, predominantly in sort of technical roles, specializing in things like ANPR and working with our partners to deliver the best solutions out there for us at Zatpark clients.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jono. Andrew, you'd like to?
Well, hello all. My name's Andy Fretcher. I'm Sales Account Manager at Unix Traffic, who many of you may know of with our previous name, which was Siemens Mobility. I've been with Unix for 3.5 years, primarily selling the civil enforcement solutions, which are based around ANPR technology. Prior to that, I have actually been selling ANPR cameras for 15 or so years now into the local government sector and police.
Oh, brilliant. Good bit of experience there then. And then finally, Simon.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Unity 5 Zatpark, for inviting me along to be on the panel today. I have to say it's quite an honor 4 weeks into my job to be invited along as an expert on ANPR. So thank you very much for that. Just to give you a little bit of background about Arvu, we're not particularly well known in the UK yet, but we are the market leader in the Netherlands for high performance artificial intelligence ANPR systems. In fact, many of you will have used our cameras, although you may not know it, because a number of leading parking solutions companies already use our cameras extensively in the UK. So I guarantee you would have been scanned by one of our cameras at some time in your life. Applications for us are static cameras for moving traffic, low emission zones, parking access control, parking enforcement, both static cameras and also scan cars. For instance, we have a couple of scan cars in Milton Keynes, which some of you may be familiar with. We do tolling cameras, both overt and covert for the police, and also railway safety cameras, which is a new product line for us. Last year, we, as a business, had a substantial investment. A new investor joined our company. And that is really driving a real desire to grow our business beyond the borders of the Netherlands substantially. And we're very keen to bring our expertise and products to the UK.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you all for being with us today. It's a pleasure to have some industry experts and leaders to provide some real insight into this ever-evolving subject. So let's kick off with a brief overview of what we're going to be covering today. So the topic is harnessing data and enhancing revenue with ANPR. So ANPR is fast becoming the go-to parking enforcement for private companies, and monitoring for moving traffic within the local authority market. ANPR is a brilliant tool for collecting data, which I know my colleague Joe wants to talk to you a bit more about. So Joe, having worked within the parking sector for 6 years, how do you see ANPR being used?
Hi everyone. Yeah, so being in the private sector for 6 years has kind of forced me into the ANPR world, and as it's changing all the time. ANPR used to be all about the retail sector, focusing on maximum stay periods, but the perception and usage has changed significantly. Retail parks are still a prime example of ANPR, but it's evolved into other sectors such as the commercial, industrial, and even residential now. There are many reasons why this has happened, a few being that managing agents and landowners have all started green initiatives, which is obviously fantastic for the planet, and it's something that people are taking more and more seriously. And ANPR systems can be used in order to kind of hit these targets, and that's by removing certain barriers such as the paper permit systems, and obviously getting less wardens on the patrols, which means less vehicles on the road, which means less emissions. Primarily, ANPR is being introduced across multiple sectors due to its ease of use, and obviously it's one of the only enforcement methods which can be quite cost effective, but it can massively grow your potential in PCNs in terms of coverage, everything. Another thing to factor in is ANPR tech is also becoming much more readily available, and the market continues to grow year on year. We at Unity 5 are seeing new vendors coming in for integration pieces all the time, and improvements and new products from existing partners are a constant, which, as you can imagine, for our customers, it's great because there's no barriers there in how they wish to go ahead. From my conversations with clients over the years, ANPR is becoming a vital revenue stream. It's now becoming a conversation of, is the site viable for ANPR before they look at other options, such as warden patrols? And this is only going to become more relevant with the proposed code changes. So in terms of ANPR usage, really, we can talk endlessly about what it can do and where it can be used, which we will go into. But at the moment, its opportunities are there for everyone to use.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Joe. Andy, from your experience, how is ANPR being applied in local authorities? Have you got any examples of where ANPR has played a vital contribution to moving traffic at all? Oh, Andy, I can't hear you. Anyone else hear Andy?
Sorry, I'm on mute. I've made the
It's okay.
rookie mistake there, and I've 15 years experience. I can't click a button.
And there was always going to be one person that would have made that mistake, and I'm glad it wasn't me.
Yeah, the very first system I put into local authorities for ANPR was actually for journey time management. So that was in Bucks in 2010, I think, where the ANPR was utilised to measure journey times, send reports out to variable message signs on the edge of town saying how long it was going to take you to get in. And it was supposed to adjust the traffic signal timings to free up certain areas. But nowadays, I do actually see slightly less of that. I think there are other methods for getting that kind of information, floating vehicle data and information provided by companies like Google will provide that. And the focus very much for local authorities nowadays is on civil enforcement, moving traffic enforcement. In London or the bigger cities, it will be things like the ULEZ, ever popular solutions. And that's really where we see the local authority market heading at the moment. It is in using ANPR to actually specifically deal with problem locations, banned turns, one-way streets, people blocking yellow box junctions. And that's really where we see the primary growth in the local authority sector.
Yeah, I know that the ULEZ is one that a lot of local authorities are looking into at the moment.
Yes.
Much to motorist dismay.
Yeah, well, we've
Okay.
provided all of them in the UK apart from Brighton, sorry, Bristol, I think it is, and they've had varying degrees of I wouldn't say success because they're all fairly successful. Acceptance is probably the better term. Varying degrees of acceptance.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Good way to put it. I know that we've worked with Reading and Bolton Council, and Jono, you've been involved in that.
Yeah, so it's been interesting sort of seeing how different local authorities are approaching it. So every authority is going to have a slightly different reason for enforcing moving traffic. There's always sort of nuances and intricacies around every town, every place that we want to use. But ANPR is very flexible technology, and the solutions offered by the VCA approved camera vendors offers a very wide range of solutions to meet those needs.
Yeah, that's brilliant. While we're talking to you, Jono, from your perspective, how easy is it for operators to integrate ANPR into their Zatpark systems?
So we try and make it really, really easy. We have a standard sort of integration process that we work with our vendors, and I believe we've recently gone through that as well.
Mm-hmm.
We try and make it as simple as possible. We work with the vendors as well to simplify setup processes, so that normally it's just a case of putting a URL in that the company is provided by our support team or keep on record, and then setting direction tags. In Zatpark, we try and make it as easy as possible for people to adopt and use this technology.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Joe, just going back onto the private sector slightly, can you just give us a bit more on the benefits of ANPR for private sectors?
Yeah, of course. I think as the previous slide mentioned, 24/7 monitoring is one of the most important parts and one of the biggest reasons why ANPR is utilised. From my experience in conversations with clients, it seems that as I said previously, the change of code is obviously putting a lot of people on edge, and it's kind of making people rethink their parking operations and kind of trying to get the best use of investment whilst also trying to reduce costs where possible. Obviously, when we do this, it's still it's an ongoing issue for clients to really think of how cost-saving measures can combat the potential changes. And having an ANPR camera can operate 24/7 with very little ongoing maintenance, which of course reduces costs, but also ensures sites are monitored as much as possible, which boosts revenue streams. A physical warden will always be a fantastic deterrent. It's something that all parking operators are still very keen to have. But with having a physical deterrent comes an increasing cost across the board, which is becoming more and more prevalent. ANPR was once used primarily in the retail situations to monitor maximum stay periods, but that's now changed, and there's loads of different people that are trying to utilize it in different areas, one of them being in residential. So again, clients moving away from the whole physical permit system to more of a registered users only system, which can then implement ANPR. But obviously it's worth saying this only works when we do not have a designated bay policy in place. If you do have a designated bay policy in place, unfortunately ANPR wouldn't be feasible here. But as ANPR operates 24/7, it can have the potential to increase PCN volumes. It's much easier for the average user to break the parking rules of the site when using a physical deterrent, as the expense of having a warden on site all day and night is actually quite unrealistic in most scenarios, which obviously then fuels the abuse of car parks, and people see a spike of people not following the rules. And obviously when you first start using ANPR, it is typical that clients see a spike in PCN volumes. However, this will plateau once the users of the site become more familiar with the change. On average, we see roughly a 7 times increase in PCM charges, and this is primarily down to the system running as a constant rather than relying on a sporadic patrols, which isn't particularly viable for certain sites.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So just looking at ANPR hardware now, Simon, as an industry leader, could you share any insight into how camera providers differ?
Yes, I can. So I can't really comment on other companies, but I can tell you what has struck me with Arvu in the 4 weeks that I've been with them. I think the first thing that really comes across, and by the way, anyone is welcome to come and visit us. If you'd like to contact me, if you want a trip to Utrecht, you'd be very welcome. But it's how passionate the team are about artificial intelligence and ANPR, and working with those technologies and directly with customers, whether they be the police force, local authorities, parking operators, technical solution providers, or even our latest technology in rail crossing safety. So as I say, first of all, it's the passion. Then I think it's the fact that we build all-in-one cameras. So our cameras are sort of separate serverless. Everything's in one box. This is one of our latest access control cameras, for instance, and everything is done inside that unit. All the processing is done real time. The other big difference, I think, with Arvu is that we build all of our own hardware as well as developing all of our own software. And that means that we can make our cameras incredibly efficient and very compact. All of our processing is done on raw data, real time in the camera. And they're also incredibly low energy. So our new Ruby camera, which I just held just now, which is being launched at Intertraffic in April, if anyone wants to see it in the flesh, is a 12-watt unit. So you can imagine that would make quite a difference in terms of solar applications, having such a powerful bit of processing, being able to operate with just 12 watts, and that's a maximum. It can be switched off during the day, the IR, which pulls the power rating down. So I think, to me, it's that we are able to have a perfect synergy between our hardware and software. They're both really tuned together to give the best possible performance. And a knock-on of that as well is that it makes us very nimble and flexible. So as an organization, because we design our own hardware and software, we're able to work very closely with customers to sort of push the boundaries of what ANPR can do for their applications. For example, we have just finished a pilot and won 40 sites with the Dutch railway operators, basically putting in a complete artificial intelligence system and ANPR camera system that basically fully monitors the safety at rail crossings. So it's watching not just vehicles and doing enforcement, it's looking at the safety of vehicles. Are they still on the line? This sort of thing. They're looking at and they're looking or tracking the movement of people, and as of course you'd expect in the Netherlands, also bicycles. So it's got a full picture of what's going on there. So I think they're a stunning company. As I say, I've just joined them, and it was a very easy decision to join them after visiting them. Anyway.
Simon, at the start of this, you said something that stuck with me a little bit, and you said that Arvu aren't necessarily a household name in the UK market. I'm just wondering, is there anything from the European market that you've learned and that you could share with us in terms of whether it's different from the UK? And then I guess a follow-up question to that would be, is there anything that we can take from the UK market from the European side?
Yeah, well, I think we've talked quite a lot about the sort of private sector, and of course we do a lot of cameras for that. But I guess the biggest lesson from the European market is probably along the lines of local authority parking enforcement. So clearly there's a very different legislative framework in the Netherlands, and that kind of sets the scene for highly sophisticated automation in the parking enforcement process, and that in turn creates a sort of environment where there's a very high demand on the ANPR technology. So we've kind of had to develop our systems to be part of a very, very efficient end-to-end process. So for instance, in Amsterdam, we use our ScanGenius scan cars. They have to be extremely efficient and accurate at gathering and processing license plate data, typically at anything between 30 and 40 miles an hour down streets with cars parked pretty closely together. We also have to make sure that the vehicles we're detecting are precisely geolocated. So typically they'll be located within 1 meter within their mapped parking bay. as well. And then that has to be very reliably and securely fed onto the PCN process. So that the technology bar, I think, because the legislation is different, to the lesson that follows through is that then it pushes the technology bar higher, which is, of course, healthy for companies like us. But the benefits of that are, I think, we've seen over the period of time when the Netherlands has changed its legislation in local authority parking, a tenfold increase in the efficiency of enforcement officers. So that leads to a high compliance in parking, higher parking revenues, and of course it also drives down costs or lets the local authorities use their parking enforcement officers more widely to provide a better service. And so it produces huge benefits. There are also interesting knock-ons, actually, because in doing this sort of work with our technology, we've got into a lot of conversations about using the scan cards we've got out there to do other things. So I mentioned that we are an AI processing company as well as an ANPR company. So some of the conversations we've got into is how to add extra value for local authorities. So our systems are also able to do things like detecting street lamps using AI, seeing and then mapping which street lamps are working, looking at the status of road signs, whether they're in the right condition, whether they need sort of work, and also looking at things like, if a skip is parked in the road, is it licensed to be there? Has it exceeded its license period? We can detect dump rubbish, dump mattresses and stuff like that, which lets the municipality do sort of its environmental work, get to a rubbish bag before it ends up being hundreds of pieces of rubbish floating down the road, and also sort of look at things like roadworks and have they extended. So I think a sort of lesson we've learned is that by maybe changing the legislation, not only do you get greater compliance and efficiency, but also there are other unexpected knock-ons in the technology.
I think what's it's actually fascinating to watch, really, because when I look back at when I first started in the parking industry, which doesn't even feel that long ago, it's amazing how much the technology has changed and how its usage is changing. And what's even more exciting for everyone on this call and for everyone in the parking industry is who knows where it's going to get to. I think there's so many developments that it can get to and so many usage cases, as you just mentioned. It's a really interesting field to be part of, and it's something that me focusing on the private sector, it's really interesting to hear how the local authorities can use it in a way that is completely different to the everyday usage that I'm using. I just find that really interesting as a subject, and how the different use cases can be so different.
No, exactly. Again, I think you can see things coming out in the news here about, for instance, pavement parking or obstructing pavements.
Yeah, I saw that the other day.
It's interesting. So we are already detecting sort of pavement parking in Amsterdam with our vehicles. So it's quite interesting to see, people like Edinburgh City Council, I think on Monday, are going to start enforcing that. So I think there's a very interesting area there of sort of using, again, some of the technology that's been developed in other countries to sort of bring across to the UK.
Well, that's it. I think from what you just described, there's clearly usage cases that will be applied in the UK at some point. It's just a when and how and if. But I think it's so interesting to hear. As you just said, it's almost like trends follow each other, don't they? So as soon as one does it, they all tend to. It's like a domino effect, and all of a sudden everyone's using it. It's just really interesting, I think, from hearing the local authority side and especially the side of AI, which I'm sure everyone on this phone call on this call would love to speak about AI. It can go on for days and days and days, but certainly one for a future chat about, because where that's going in the ANPR world is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, definitely. While we're talking about local authority, if I bring Andy back in terms of ANPR usage within local authority, how has it changed for local
Very
authority
little
market?
is the actual answer to that. The bottom line is with local authority use, and police the same, they are limited to what they're allowed to do by the regulations and all that kind of stuff. It's why For civil enforcement, for example, there's only a few companies that are approved by the Vehicle Certification Agency to provide that solution. And typically there are other things that you might want to do. For example, there's current discussions on things like seatbelt detection and mobile phone use, but that would not be enforced by the local authority. That would be enforced by the police. So the local authority guy that's paying for his camera, although he'll have an interest in that because it's technology and it's clever and it's all nice, he's not going to get any benefit himself out of it, because that data would have to go to somewhere else for it to be enforced. So the limiting factor within local authority uses is the legislation, and that very much drives the market and the sector in some capacity. For me, with regards to ANPR usage of local authority, the things that they are asking for today are the things that we really would be expecting and asking for in every industry. That's better performance, more reliability, lower cost. They really are the driving factors within the sector, and that's been very much the case for quite a long time, really.
Yeah, I know that the local authorities are definitely got their regulations and things which they're obviously have to abide by. We've had a question come in actually before we move on about ANPR and bay monitoring. So they just want to know your thoughts on ANPR for bay monitoring. Are there any effective, both in technical terms and cost terms, ANPR or camera-led solutions for bay monitoring, such as EV bays or permit holder only bays? I'll open it up to
no, that's a fantastic question, and I can just see Jono jumping at the bit to get in here. But so I'll let
you go first, Joe.
I think with bay monitoring, it's a fascinating subject, and it's something that you can see in the park industry at the moment. There's providers out there that are using bay monitoring software for the likes of yellow lines, for the likes of no parking areas, and they're very much going down that route to start. And I can very much see this going in a way that is focusing on EV bays and permit holder only bays. Now, what I love about bay monitoring is it opens up such a huge range of opportunity, because for your average residential site that might be designated bays, but you might have certain areas that shouldn't be parked in, it's such an easy entry into ANPR and how its uses can be massively effective on sites. So I see this being a huge thing within the ANPR industry, and I certainly see this being something that's taken and used everywhere, really.
Jono, did you have anything you wanted to add on that? I know
I was going to say, Joe, you've covered a lot of the bits that I was going to sort of say there. But yeah, there's I mean, from my perspective, there's a great market out there for it, and yes, a couple of people are already doing it. There's a lot of work going underway with lots of companies that are focusing on this, and I think it's probably the next sort of big evolution in the ANPR world is working out the cost-effective ways of managing multiple bays where a traditional ANPR camera probably wouldn't help, and especially when it comes to things like permit managed bays and things like that, and having especially things like that where, as Joe alluded to earlier, without sort of manned CCTV, you wouldn't be able to enforce that, or having a boots on the ground, which ultimately is quite expensive, and recruitment is always quite a difficult thing for boots on the ground. Or at least the feedback I've had about that is that it is. And there's a myriad of options, and I think EVs are another good one as well, where you see instances of petrol vehicles parking in EV bays, or people using EV bays as parking, and then sort of just loosely connecting the chargers in and actually taking away that service for everybody else. I think that's key. And as I think the next couple of months are going to be interesting, and events like ParkX and InterTrafX, there's going to be some interesting solutions sort of there and available. And if anyone has any cool ideas, I'd love to hear them as well, because there's a myriad of options that can be done with this.
100%. Simon, are you seeing quite a lot of people asking about bay monitoring?
Yes, a few. And I think it's interesting the way sort of the camera technology has moved forward. So Our cameras are, as well as becoming higher performance, they're becoming more cost effective. And so I think it broadens the range of solutions. And obviously with bay monitoring, you're sort of focused in on a much smaller area, but we can see how our compact cameras could provide a very good solution for that. I think probably there are different camera solutions for different particular bay monitoring applications, but I think there's certainly some scope for sort of high performance stuff as well in that market.
Yeah, completely agree. Like you all said, ANPR it's evolving constantly, and it's exciting to see what else it can do and what's coming next. I'm conscious that we haven't talked too much about data and insights. So in regards to data and insights, how can ANPR be a tool for this? Joe, I know you've had some hands-on experience with the benefits of ANPR in regards to data insights.
Yeah, so from my experience, data is actually the key to ANPR. It's one of the main reasons why it's adopted. Especially in the private sector, it allows landowners to understand their sites better. It gives an insight into peak periods, which they can use to make informed decisions. So they can make a decision on staffing levels, promotional materials, all these kind of information that previously they would not have had without having somebody sat in a box in the car park, which just isn't feasible for a cost point of view. In the retail sector, this is a prime example. So you can, if a client sees that the weekend yields the most traffic to site, they may decide to run a promotion throughout the week, which will then try and boost the numbers up. And I from speaking to clients, and this goes back years and years, it's all about what data can landowners have, what can they get, what can they get, how can they understand the site better, how can they understand who's visiting the sites better. And for that, it just becomes, it's an essential part of the parking climate at the moment. And clients and landowners just simply want to know and to have as much as possible, which is something that, as an organization, I'm sure that, well, I'll bring Jono in a second just to go in from a Zatpark point of view, but from an industry point of view, it's something that we need to keep up with, and we need to make sure that we are evolving as we go, because it's just essential.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know from my experience of speaking to clients as well, it's all about the data. It's that how people do the reporting and things like that, so you can see what's actually happening on your own land and in your car parks. So in terms of Zatpark, Jono, how can we assist in reporting on the data?
Of course, so we have a system called Site Analytics, which is available to both the operator and to individual site owners through our client portals. So we can report things like occupancy dwell and emissions stuff that comes through as well. So you can get a really good sort of profile of, how many polluting vehicles you're getting through, how many EVs you're getting through, and we can offer those insights in almost real time, for people to go through and see. There's also some sort of more advanced reporting that can be done, and we're always looking at new ways to bring reporting into Zatpark and to make it useful for clients.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. We've had a few questions already sent in, so let's have a quick look at these. So the first question, I think, is for you, Jono, really. Which is, would you be interested in partnering with universities to use your vehicles and parking data in research?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously, the data is our clients, so it'd be very driven by clients' demands and what they would like to do with their data. But there's a lot of interesting things that can come as we share data as an industry that can be sorted out. And universities and higher education establishments are great places to sort of do a lot of that analytics work and produce some really interesting insights.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. The next question, I think, Simon, you'll probably be the best person to answer this one. So how is an anonymity ensured using ANPR data?
Okay, that's a really good question. So I think I've mentioned already that we do all of our image processing inside the camera. So it allows us to contain it. So we're not sending loads of data to a separate server for then to work through and work out who's contravening and stuff like that. So that it's, first of all, it's a very contained process for us. That allows us to do a number of things. So we are able to do real-time blurring on subjects that aren't of interest. So, for instance, both in our scan cars and our static cameras, if we spot a contravention, we can keep all the relevant data to the vehicle that's doing the contravention, but we can automatically blur out in the video and in the still shots the number plates of surrounding vehicles, blur out people, and even also blur out vehicles that aren't of interest. So that allows us to focus the bit of data on the subject of interest. Then we only send the data that's relevant. So if it's a contravention, for instance, moving traffic contravention, we would only send the data relating to that particular vehicle. We're not sending a constant stream of all the vehicles that are coming down or moving through that traffic. So that also allows us to contain it. Everything within the camera on the local storage is encrypted, and it also, for GDPR reasons, has an auto delete function, so it deletes after a prescribed period of time as well. When we send the data, it's over a encrypted VPN connection, so that makes it also very secure. And of course, there are all the usual sort of credentials for getting onto the system. So that means that we're only using the data we have to, and then we have a lot of protection around the data that we're providing.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Joe, did you have anything that you wanted to add in regards to that?
I actually just wanted to ask Andy about the reporting for moving traffic. Is there anything that you can share with us that's got maybe different to the private, how it works, really?
I was going to say, Joe, it's actually very, very similar. They are interested in traffic flows. They are also interested in types of vehicle, how many HGVs, how many cars, all that kind of stuff. Aside from how many contraventions, obviously, and how that varies over time and over periods, they are just interested in quantities of vehicle. And certainly more so with the speed enforcement. When you put a speed enforcement camera in, how does that actually affect the road flow? Do people start nipping off down rat runs and all that kind of stuff? So very similar types of information that they want to be able to make decisions to help the road flow better down the line.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Okay.
So just to sort of jump in, question for you, Andy. Obviously, all of your stuff is through the VCA type approval certifications, yes. And there's a lot of sort of going back to the anonymity question and making sure data's secure. Can you sort of expand on what has to be done for local authorities?
I think all the things that Simon said we're 100% agree with, and we do what we can where we can. I think with regards, certainly the VCA approval, there are limits to what you can do with an image, because at the end of the day, they don't want manipulated images. When you're looking at enforcing a ticket, you need to be sure that it is, a raw image, so to speak, and that hasn't been played about with too much. We give the operators the ability to blur out plates and people. We now supply the cameras with functions so that we can blank out people's front doors and bathroom windows when we're looking at doing a low traffic neighborhood zone. So we do as much as we can, but it has to be within the requirements of the legislation as to what we can change.
That was really interesting.
Yeah, completely agree.
Yeah, we've got quite strict regulations in this country.
It's probably more of a general.
There's a civil enforcement. It's not too arduous, but certainly the speed enforcement. Those kind of approval processes. They're 2-3 year processes from start to finish, and to a degree, I think it can actually affect what they're able to provide into the marketplace. But I'm aware that there's an industry group trying to address that at the moment.
So say, sort of a generic question for the panel is, could there be a better way to kind of do it? Obviously, type approval is there for a reason, and it's very much needed. But could there be a way to potentially review that and bring in some of the newer technologies to offer really good solutions that the private industry has already?
Yeah, I have found the VCA very approachable. They say that there are slightly different side of it to the Home Office, the speed enforcement guys. So I think perhaps it is worth a discussion with the Vehicle Certification Agency as to what they would look at and consider, or just to get their perspective as well on why some of the legislation is as it is.
Yeah, I agree. It's I mean, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? At a time when local authorities are sort of strapped for cash and having to be very careful with their money, and you know, parking managers are under pressure to increase compliance and revenue. The processes are very restrictive, you know, so it's great that you can use ANPR for move it traffic and specific parking, you know, offences like, you know, bus lanes and school clear zones and those red routes, that sort of thing. But, you know, we're still having to send CEOs out on the street issuing PCNs by hand. We've attempted ourselves to try and improve the process, but, you know, we can just about push it as far as using ANPR spotter cars, but they are limited to helping local authorities spot where people might currently be contravening. So that gives an improvement in efficiency, but it's nowhere near that sort of 10 times that we talked about for Europe. And you know, I'd certainly be very interested in talking to anyone perhaps after this thing about who has any thoughts and ideas about you know, where we could perhaps move things within the legislation as it sits at the moment, or sort of pushing the legislation further forward. Because it's a, you know, it's a growing thing, isn't it? Pressure on finances, but you need to push up compliance and revenues. They're contradictory things at the moment.
Definitely.
Yeah, I would say it's less so with regards moving traffic enforcement, because that really should be about solving the problem, whereas parking's a slightly different kettle of fish.
Yeah, and moving traffic's much easier with ANPR, of course.
On the back of your comment, Simon, we've had another question come in actually about local authorities. So they've said, I'm aware of some local authorities using mobile ANPR to capture observations of vehicles parked. This data is then provided to an on-foot officer to issue a PCN. Do you have any insight or information on how this may be viewed at appeals when the initial observation is not recorded on foot? And as such, with a limited waiting bay, there is no guarantee option to check if a vehicle has moved and returned or remained for the duration. I think it's more Andrew question.
I do know of local authorities that are doing that. At the end of the day, if the vehicle's parked illegally, when the CEO gets there, then he's parked illegally. I'll be honest, I don't get to see the complaint side of that.
No.
It's pretty tough one to argue if the guy's caught you there, isn't it?
I think it largely depends on obviously the way that it is being used. You know, so obviously, as Andy said, you know, if the vehicle is in a non-stopping area or something like that, then you know, the observation from the vehicle should be valid. You know, it's an interesting question though, and I'd like to explore it maybe after the session a little bit more. So,
well, it's
anything that can be used.
It's very clear for, you know, specific applications, isn't it? You know, like you're saying, school key clear zones and cycle lanes and those sorts of things. But I have to say, I mean, Andrew, you've got a lot longer experience than me. I spent, I think, a lot of the time, my first 4 weeks of working with Arvo, reading the various pieces of legislation, and it is very difficult to get your head around that particular aspect, because if you could use it in that way, in there lies, you know, potential for a lot more efficiency. So whoever posed the questions, well, it'd be very interesting to have a chat with them after the call, if that's an area of interest for them.
100%. That's fine. We can pass those details on. Okay, so we've had some other questions come in. So in regards to regulations, one of the main questions was, are current ANPR regulations fit for purpose? I know it's something that we've briefly touched on previously. What's all your thoughts on this?
I think they are, belt and braces approach is perhaps where they're coming from, to ensure that the correct people get the correct ticket. I'm sure that, like a lot of people, you still read those horror stories in the newspapers, don't you? And they always make the front page of somebody whose jump has been red walking down a bus lane. But ultimately, at the end of the day, that shouldn't happen. That is a review operator's error. The legislation is there to ensure that every offence should be reviewed by an operator to deal with those kind of things. Yeah, I think the legislation is good in stopping those kind of things. The application of that legislation is perhaps a larger problem where people aren't actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. But again, I'd go back to the speed enforcement legislation. I'm not entirely sure it is fit for purpose. It is very belt and braces. There's no arguing a speeding offence, for example. Unless the process has been followed incorrectly. But they are very restrictive on what the market is able to buy and use. And I think it has hurt that market sector.
I think legislation is definitely required, and having very strict rules and regulations about what can be used, especially as you're saying for things like speeding and for moving traffic is key. But there's also, it has to have some flexibility for allowing innovation as well. Making sure that the industry as a whole can grow and improve, and we can bring in more reliable, well, not more reliable, that's probably the wrong word, but newer technologies to assist in this process. Ultimately, we need to make sure that the technology is fit for the purpose, and that as long as it's always reviewed, then that's it's good.
Good balance, Colin.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you. We've had another question come in going back to data actually. In terms of delivering and interpreting data, what do members of the panel think is the most effective means of presenting data insights, exportable reports, dashboards, etc.? And do you think the demands vary across the private and public sector?
I'm happy to jump in on this one. I think Sarah, your question's very valid, and I think it's one that I actually feel could be the same. And Andy, if that's wrong, please let me know. But I actually think in terms of data, it's just getting the information across the line as easy as possible. I think it's a case of when we receive data and how we present data, it's not necessarily going to the person asking for it, if that makes sense. It's normally going to like a landowner or somebody that might not have day-to-day running of the site, which means that it has to be presented in a way that's clear, easy, and frankly, amendable to how they wish to have it, whether it be in PDF, Excel, all that kind of thing. I think live dashboards, I think exportable reports are very important. And I think that especially from a Zatpark point of view, we've got future reporting in the works to kind of combat this, because we understand it's very important. But from my point of view, I believe that it would probably be the same across private and public sector in just making it easy to view. Now, I don't know if Andy and Simon have their own thoughts on that, but by all
I'd
means.
agree with that, Joe. I'd agree, and I'd also agree with the fact that quite often the person that's paid for the camera or whatever is not the person that wants that data. So again, for local authorities, it'll be the parking guy that wants the offences, but the traffic flow data will be for the road planners or maybe the people that set up the traffic signal timings. So exportable reports, I guess. But as you say, easily attainable reports.
Ease of use is always key, especially with reporting. You can make things vastly overcomplicated, and actually sometimes people just want headline values, don't they? Or the ability to pull that into a pre-existing reporting matrix or something like that. That us as vendors, we have to make sure that we can meet the client's demands, right?
Yeah, and I think to expand on what Sarah's saying, in terms of the private and public sector, I actually think reports may need to change depending on who's actually asking it within the organization. So for example, we have like, if you take a retail park, for example, like the landowner might want a specific report, but then the actual parking operator will want something completely different. So it's just making sure that the reports and the dashboards that can be offered, or that hopefully will be offered, actually incorporate everything so that everyone can take their individual slices and what's actually appropriate to their role. And that's something that is very important. As I said previously, with data being such a massive part of ANPR usage, it's trying to make sure that we have all those reports in a way that can be exported to the individual demands.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. I think that's answered our last question as well, which is, can you provide live dashboards? I know it's something that we're in the process of building. John, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on that from the Zatpark point of view.
I think we've covered most of it already from Joe there.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, we've had another question come in, which is, what is the best way to get in contact with you to follow up questions and discussions? So that's something that we're going to send you all out an email, which will have our contact details on, and we are more than happy to take away any questions or discussion points that you want to bring up with us in the future. But I think that's it for us from today. So first of all, thank you very much for our panelists. Thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions or any follow-up comments, please feel free to get in touch.
Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
everyone.